Okay, so I don't think Sons of the Forest is a bad game. Let me just start with that. But I personally was quite disappointed with Sons of the Forest. Let me explain. So let's go back to roughly 2016 to 2017. Me and a couple of my friends became suddenly obsessed with playing a game called The Forest. You see, The Forest filled a very specific gap that I've been trying to fill for a while. A survival horror game that is also co-op. And you see, it was that expectation that allowed me to be teed up for a wild ride, as the complexity and fun that was found inside The Forest completely exceeded my expectations. So naturally, after finishing the first game, myself and my buddy were very much looking forward to the release of the sequel game titled Sons of the Forest. And after playing and streaming the entire experience over at twitch.tv, go check it out, I can't help but feel like I missed something. Like the magic just wasn't there for me this time. So let's chat today about why seemingly Sons of the Forest left me disappointed. Sons of the Forest is a game developed by N-Night Games. It's a survival crafting horror experience with a large focus on exploration. You spend your days cave diving, cutting down trees, building bases and fortifications, as well as fighting off increasingly grotesque mutant cannibals. It's quite the premise. And this premise served the first game in the series really well. The original game titled The Forest saw you doing largely the same thing, exploring, crafting and killing cannibals. What the sequel has added and changed are mostly quality of life adjustments, graphical enhancements, and of course, a new story to get lost in. And get lost in it we did. More on that later. Now is probably a great time to mention that I'll try to avoid any major spoilers, but if you don't want any spoilers at all, you're probably better off putting this video in your watch later playlist and coming back once you've beaten the game. Alrighty, let's do this. As always, let's start with the most important part of any game, its gameplay. So to get into the gameplay of Sons of the Forest, I think I should start with the gameplay of the first game, The Forest. You see, The Forest had a very interesting mix of charm and clunkiness. Everything the game was doing at the time was unique and fresh, so the clunkiness that was present in things like the movement, the combat, and the building was part of the charm thanks to it excelling in other areas. Everything in the game was so new and fresh, at least for me at the time, that it felt like all the jank gameplay stuff could easily be looked past. So fast forward to Sons of the Forest here in 2024, the gameplay is still janky and clunky. Now I get if people are going to say that the janky movement and combat is part of the game's identity and charm, and I'm sure I can to some level agree with that now as the second game so willingly continued it, but part of my excitement for the sequel was to hopefully see a lot of these things changed and fixed. Maybe I've spent too much time in silly AAA garbage where the only good thing about a game is its silky smooth movement. I'm happy to say this issue is a me problem mostly, but it doesn't change the fact that I was disappointed when playing this game. In terms of gameplay loop, the first game's explore, fight, build, and cave dive, it's all here. Same as it was in the first game, but man, for me it was all just needlessly large. I remember in the first game, once you discovered something like the diving suit, you could now access those 1 or 2 caves that had underwater sections, which was super exciting. But in Sons of the Forest, it feels like every single cave has an underwater section, and every section of the map has a cave that looks exactly the same as the last one you explored, and it probably has an underwater section. There was so much awe and wonder the first time you stumbled across the giant sinkhole in the first game, but here in Sons of the Forest, other than maybe one of the facilities and the final cave in the game, everything was so predictable and lacked any kind of meaningful variation. And do not get me started on like the 3 to 4 slip and slide entrances to the same cave with the one single same exit. Oh my goodness, after sliding down there multiple times, I was about ready to rage quit if another cave led me to that same bigger cave with no way out except for a 5 to 10 minute trek through a part we had already explored multiple times already. Don't get me wrong, the thing you find down there is really cool, but finding it again and again and again, it really lost its cool. I understand the need to have multiple entrances due to how large the map is, so finding just 1 or 2 existing entrances might be too hard, but to be honest, there's no reason at all for the map to be that large in the first place. Especially considering, just like the first game, there's barely any variation in the above ground landscape. It's a forest or a snowy mountain, and that's it. Okay, from the editing room here, just adding in that there is a golf course, but really it's just a bit of flat ground with less trees, so just a forest with less trees. Back to the video. Now, considering I'm on this topic of the map, I think various traversal options added to the game are great. The golf carts, gliders, the little one wheels, they're all really cool in different ways. Shout out to the golf carts especially, they were probably the highlight of the entire playthrough. Literally so many laughs and hilarious moments. They're also the most OP weapon in the game. Getting launched across the map when you hit something wrong was very funny. But I should also acknowledge the vehicles are basically mandatory because the map is so large. Okay, quickly on combat, it's really the same as the first game. Like almost exactly the same. The weapons are cool and more fleshed out in this one, but I did really miss the ability to upgrade them with teeth and sap like you could in the first game. It meant less penalty was given if you happened to miss a new weapon while exploring, which we did on a few occasions and only discovered them in our second or third visit to the same location. The cannibals themselves were fine, basically the same as the first game with some additions, but outside of bosses, nothing that really made me go, whoa, this is great. Speaking of the bosses, these were all genuine surprises and I loved all the encounters we had with them, especially the final one. It was a cool way to end the game for sure. I did love the extensive additions of the wildlife in the game as well. Screw the sharks though, those things are way too scary. Alrighty, building. This one for me is wild. Why on earth did they make the building so needlessly complex and hard to use? Like, I get that this building system offers almost complete freedom in design, but when you are spending most of your time fighting the controls and systems rather than building your base, it's just not worth it. In our playthrough, we built 4 foundations and never came back to them. We literally gave up on base building. Contrast that to the original game, I remember going crazy with base building. I really do love what they tried to do here, and I really hope they refine it and fix its jank in the next game, but man, in its current state in this game, it did not land for me. Okay, that section was large. Let's talk about the story. I know this game's story was like the first in the sense that you have to dig a little deeper to really understand what's going on, but I didn't expect that after the first completion, I would just have no idea what's going on. Like by the end of the game, all I really know is that one specific thing causes another specific thing to happen on the island, trying to avoid spoilers here, and some characters I know were involved. And that's kind of it. There is some interdimensional stuff going on, but it's vague. Basically, without spoiling as much as I can, by the end of the game, I wasn't even slightly hooked enough to warrant playing for a different ending like I did back in the first game. I will probably at some point just go and watch them all on YouTube, which honestly sucks. The first game set you up with the premise that you need to find your son Timmy, and then everything went wild from there onwards. This one is like, you're here to find some dudes that went missing, and I'm kind of like, who was I looking for again? Did we find them? I don't know. What was his name? What was her name? The beauty about finding Timmy in the first game was how plain and simple it was. There was only one child on the island, and that child was your objective. It didn't matter what corpse you found or who you did or didn't kill, it was always obvious that it was not Timmy until the very end of the game when you finally found him. Turns out, in Sons of the Forest, you do find the guys you were looking for, but for me and my bud, we didn't even realize until afterwards because you only ever see their faces on a laptop at the beginning of the game or see their names written on notes around the map. Like, they're basically unimportant and just a reason for you to be on the island in the first place. I don't actually even know what their role was in the story. I think maybe they owned the islands? I don't know. That's the issue, I guess. After the succinct yet intriguing story of the first game, I couldn't help but be let down with this one. Now, the reason I said at the beginning of this video that I don't think this is a bad game is because I don't. I did just want to spend a moment mentioning some of the things that I really enjoyed here. The golf carts, just too much fun. Again, they were the highlight of the whole game. The wildlife. Great additions, stumbling across a moose for the first time was really cool. The cannibal AI, they felt a lot smarter and more menacing than the first game, which I loved. The weapons, yes I miss upgrading with teeth, but the amount of weapons in this game was great. The backpack was super easy to use and laid out very well. The map, I kinda like it, but also found it too necessary due to the lack of meaningful landmarks and how ridiculously large the map was. So where do I land with this game? Again, I don't hate it, but I also don't know if I'll ever go back and play it again. It doesn't really do anything meaningful enough to make me want to jump back in and explore more or get a new ending. I can tell you 100% that I have no interest in building a base. With a survival crafting game, that kinda says a lot. Sons of the Forest holds onto the charm of the first game, but with that comes the clunkiness and jank of old, while expanding areas of the game that probably needed it the least, and taking a few things such as the size of the map and amounts of empty caves way too far, and finally leaving out seemingly the best parts of the first game, like the spectacle and unique landmarks to instead create a world that I'm sure some Forest fans and new players alike will love and adore, but for me, I couldn't help but just feel a sense of disappointment with my time here. That's probably all I have for today. It was great to see you all again. Hopefully I'll see you in the next video. Please like, please subscribe. See you soon.